Lisbon's story begins with water. From the Tagus, ships carried Portugal into a wider world, bringing new wealth and power to the city. Then, on the morning of the 1st of November, 1755, the ground began to shake. Fire and a tsunami followed, leaving much of the center in ruins. But Lisbon did not simply rebuild what it had lost, it created a different city. How did one morning change Lisbon forever? To understand Lisbon, we first have to understand where it stands. The city grew on the northern bank of the Tagus estuary, where the river opens towards the Atlantic. Its deep, sheltered water gave ships a safe place to anchor, while the hills above offered protection and a clear view across the harbor. Long before Lisbon became a capital, this meeting point of river, ocean, and high ground had already made it a natural place for settlement, trade, and defense. That geography soon drew the wider world to Lisbon. By the 8th century BC, the settlement around today's Castle Hill was connected to Phoenician trading networks that stretched across the Mediterranean. Centuries later, the Romans developed the city they called Olisipo, building a theater on the hillside and using its harbor to move goods between the Atlantic coast and the Roman Empire. The names and rulers changed, but Lisbon's earliest story had already found its pattern. Whoever held this hill and this river held a gateway between worlds. After Roman rule faded, Lisbon changed again. Muslim forces took the city in the early 8th century. Behind its walls, a medina spread down the hillside towards the river, while a strong fortress protected the city from above. For centuries, the city grew as part of the Islamic world of Iberia. Then, in 1147, Portugal's first king, Afonso Henriques, surrounded Lisbon with the help of crusaders traveling from northern Europe. After almost 4 months, the city surrendered, followed by the violence and displacement that often came with medieval conquest. Lisbon had entered a new kingdom, but it still carried the shape of the city that came before. Its new rulers soon made the city the center of the kingdom. In 1255, King Afonso III moved his court from Coimbra to Lisbon, and the royal administration followed the next year. Political power now stood beside the Tagus and its natural harbor. As the city grew, the river became more than a line of defense. It became the road from the royal capital to the Atlantic, preparing Lisbon for the voyages, trade, and expansion that would transform both the city and the wider world. By the end of the 15th century, that future had arrived. Portuguese sailors had spent decades exploring the Atlantic and pushing farther along the coast of Africa. Then, in 1497, Vasco da Gama left the Tagus with 4 ships, searching for a sea route to India. The following year, after sailing around Africa, his expedition reached Calicut, on India's southwest coast. For Lisbon, this changed everything. Its harbour was no longer simply the gateway to the Atlantic, it was becoming a major link between Europe and the Indian Ocean. Spices and other goods arriving through the harbour brought great wealth to the Portuguese crown. In Belém, King Manuel I used part of that wealth to support major building projects. Construction of the Jeronimos Monastery and the Tower of Belém began in the early 16th century. Together, they became lasting symbols of the period when Lisbon was growing into one of Europe's most important maritime centers. By the middle of the 18th century, Lisbon's lower city beside the Tagus had become the center of royal government and commerce. The royal palace stood close to the river, surrounded by shops and narrow streets. Then, on the morning of the 1st of November, 1755, a powerful earthquake struck. Buildings collapsed, and many people moved towards open spaces near the waterfront, trying to escape the falling buildings. But the disaster was not over. Not long after the earthquake, a tsunami entered the Tagus and flooded parts of the lower city. Fires then spread through damaged neighborhoods and continued for days. Together, the earthquake, water and fire destroyed much of central Lisbon, including the royal palace and many buildings that had defined the old city. When the fires finally ended, Lisbon faced something much larger than repairing damaged streets. Much of the center would have to be planned and built again. Reconstruction began in 1756, under King José I. The old maze of narrow streets was replaced by a regular grid of straighter roads, ordered blocks and more uniform buildings. Many buildings used a timber framework inside their masonry walls, known as the Pombaline cage, designed to improve stability during an earthquake. Beside the Tagus, the area once occupied by the royal palace became a new grand riverside square, while the new streets of Baixa stretched north from the waterfront. More than 2.5 centuries later, the new layout still shapes the center of Lisbon. The earthquake destroyed much of the old city, but the rebuilding helped create the Lisbon we know today. And perhaps the best way to understand that is simply to walk through it. From the open squares and straight streets of Baixa, the city begins to climb. Follow the hills towards Alfama, and Lisbon changes character. The streets become narrower, twisting between old houses, steep stairways, and small neighborhood squares. In Alfama and Moraria, Fado remains part of the city's cultural identity. Music shaped by stories of everyday life, love and loss. And then there are the simpler pleasures, sitting outside a cafe, walking without a destination, or stopping for a warm pastel de nata, the small custard tart that has become one of Lisbon's best-known flavors. Here, discovering Lisbon is often less about where you are going, and more about what you find along the way. Its history is never far away, but neither is the life that has grown around it. The river, the hills, the old neighborhoods and the rebuilt streets all tell different parts of the same story. A story shaped by centuries of change, and a city that still carries every one of those layers today. Lisbon is more than a beautiful place to visit. Once you understand how it became what it is, you begin to see it differently.